lining is made up of secretory IgA. That's a particular molecule that the immune system produces, which is fantastic because we're designed to have that protective layer being there. By the way, if you use a lot of non-steroidals, ibuprofen, aspirin, those sorts of things, it breaks down that protective lining. It's one of the reasons why aspirin causes ulcers and has problems with the intestinal tract, and ibuprofen alleviates those sorts of things. So in addition, as soon as that kind of a thing happens, then it starts to cross-react with whatever we have a lot of. And since our culture is so focused on wheat, and since the wheat we now eat is Frankenwheat, right? This is not ancient grain wheat, which had relatively low gluten level. The ancient grains, many people can tolerate ancient wheats, heirloom varieties of wheat. But when you start having wheat that has 4 times as much gluten as the wheat used to have, basically we've evolved a new species, and our guts are not used to dealing with that much of one specific kind of a challenge over and over and over, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And most people have that kind of food all day, every day. So it overcomes our ability to actually try to attach to it in the lumen of the gut, the inside of the tube of the intestinal tract, and take it out. We just can't do it. And then it starts to damage these tight junctions, because this is supposed to be right next to each other. The only things that are supposed to get through the cells in our intestinal tract are the things that our body absorbs and pulls in. It's not supposed to be leaky. It's not supposed to be porous. But ultimately it gets to be porous, and we incorporate things that should never come into our body. When that happens, these cells, because the highest conglomeration of the immune system is in our intestinal tract. That's the most number of immune cells that we have. We are designed to really perceive the world through taste and through what we put into our body, and the immune system is designed to protect us there. So it's waiting to find things that aren't supposed to get through. So when things like gluten gets through, these cells, they just are ready. They are ready to pop. And when they start to pop, they produce all those molecules we talked about. That makes this even leakier. And that allows even more things to come in. Did you know that if a person truly has celiac disease, truly celiac, not a gluten sensitivity, because you can have either or both, that it takes 2 years after the avoidance of all gluten for the intestinal tract to heal itself. So this is a slow process. So you can imagine what a trigger for inflammation this is on a regular, ongoing basis.
Does corn have similar autoimmune qualities? Because our consumption of corn, it's in everything we do now. If you do a skin test, we're something like 80-something% corn.
Yes.
Does that have any sort of autoimmune intestinal?
It has some. It doesn't seem to be as much as the gluten. But for people who become sensitive to corn, and anybody whose intestinal tract does not have integrity, is not, those tight junctions are impaired, can become sensitive to any number of things, including very healthy things. So there's no restriction on what we can become sensitive to once our intestinal tracts don't work. And clearly, corn is one of those things. It's one of the top 7 food sensitivities. But it's just not nearly as high as casein, which is a dairy protein, or gluten. Now, corn is we think one of the chief reasons why people develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because it has such high glycemic index, and we have so much of it in so much of our food. We think that that's one of the drivers for inflammation that produces liver disease.
And 95% of it is GMO.
Almost all corn is GMO. Almost all corn is GMO. My concern with GMO, you know how they make GMO? They take a gene from a bacteria, usually, and they insert it into the genome of the plant, whatever that is. Or now we're soon to have, this is awful, genetically modified salmon, right? That was just approved, unfortunately. Europe doesn't approve any of this, right? None of this. But the unique thing about bacterial genomes, and this happens in our gut, and it's only been identified once conclusively through soy, but bacteria trade genes as part of their division They just sort of say, oh, look, you need this one, I'm going to give you this one, which is how antibiotic resistance forms. That one species of bacteria has a resistance to a certain antibiotic, and it meets another species, and it says, sure, I'll give you mine, and then that other species becomes resistant to that bacteria. That happens a lot in hospitals, because that's where these things come together. But it also happens in our gut, and generally that's not a problem. We're designed to live that way. And like I said, only one time that I'm aware of has it been shown that a gene that was placed, genetically modified, placed into a vegetable, and this was into soy, actually jumped across and came into the bacterial genome in our intestinal tract. So it is conceivable. It doesn't seem to happen often, but nevertheless. One of the other things I wanted to point out here was that over here, you're looking at multi-system disorder, so that when you develop these sensitivities to food, and this is a source of inflammation, then those molecules can say, what else looks like me? And I'm going to cross-react with whatever looks like me. So Hashimoto's thyroiditis, look to the gut. Okay? And don't let anybody tell you, oh, you just have Hashimoto's. You know, they would be content to watch you develop either hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, because it will likely lead to one of those two things. If there's something we can identify that with changes in diet or lifestyle, with certain kinds of natural interventions, or even medical ones if we need, that can prevent you from developing a disease, let's do it. Why should we wait until somebody becomes hypothyroid when we could have predicted it years in the past that this could have been a possibility? But it's not just the thyroid it will react to. It can react to components of the neurological system. Again, I've removed, or not removed, I have worked to reverse multiple sclerosis in people just by changing their diet. These things are not things that are forever progressive necessarily. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't.